My name is Christopher Cronin. I'm broadcasting from Honolulu, Hawaii, and I'm going to record my first chapter of my first book that I ever did called It's Not My Fault, but Here's What Happened. Again, my name is Christopher Cronin, and I'm going to start off with the author's page. I was born in Boston as the fifth and last child in an Irish family in a predominantly Irish Italian neighborhood, and I observed massive societal changes right in front of my eyes. Witnessing the end of the Cold War and the beginning of the Civil Rights Movement, and also it was the start and the ending of the Vietnam War, which led to sex, drugs, and rock and roll revolution. And I also witnessed assassinations of prominent leaders. Our generation developed a more cynical view of the world and life overall. As I reached my teenage years, I was part of the beginning of the desegregation era in our Boston public school systems, which meant forced busings in the early 70s. Our generation lived through a lot of turmoil, and many families took sides, both pro and against the societal changes. America was at a crossroads. Having early symptoms of manic depression and or schizophrenia and not knowing how to deal with life while having these symptoms, I turned to a process of self-medication. After extensive conflicts early on, I developed a hard outer shell for survival purposes where I felt a little more in control. As life progressed, I managed not to let life beat me down and benefited by having an optimistic demeanor in spite of having deep depression, where at times it took total hold of me. I, however, always tried putting myself in the best possible position I could because of an inner desire to not settle for less. Having strong family influences, both positive and negative, were both a blessing and a curse. Chapter 1. The Early Days. It is not possible for a kid to go through a nervous breakdown at the age of 7. I actually think so, because I sense I did. Second grade was a real tough year in my life. Miss O'Leary, known as one of the meanest teachers in our public school system, just happened to find out that I was smoking cigarettes with some of the other guys. Consequently, she decided to hang me up on a coat hook like a slab of meat at the butcher shop for all the classmates to see. She kept me hanging there in the closet for an hour or so to show everybody what happens to kids like me who disappoint her. Meanwhile, some of the other kids came into the closet room and began laughing at me, which only made me lash out, swinging and kicking wildly at them. That's not all. At the same time, twice a week, I also had CCD classes with a second grade catechism teacher who was named Sister Bennett. She was famous for doling out a wicked punishment that we nicknamed the rattan. We considered this a medieval punishment that those nuns would use, which amounted to them wailing on our knuckles with a ruler, causing extreme pain for little kids such as we were. She happily gave out this punishment way too often to misbehaving little Catholic boys like me to keep us under her complete control. One day, I tested her patience just too many times. As a middle-class Boston Irish kid in second grade, I was expected to start confession that year and receive Holy Communion. This did not go down as planned because, of course, I had to test Sister Bennett and fool around in class. Much to my surprise, she was more than willing to mete out my punishment, the rattan, on my knuckles as an example to everybody in class as to how not to act in class. She grabbed my arm with one hand and swung down that damn ruler on my knuckles with the other as hard as she could. The first whack fucking hurt. Well, the proverbial shit hit the fan. Before she swung twice, I jumped out of my seat, stood up, kicked her right in the shins, and made my escape out the door. She did not bother to chase me because she was too busy rubbing her very sore shins. I eventually made my way home, and to my surprise, my parents had not even gotten a phone call from Sister Bennett. She didn't even bother to call my home. Lucky me. I was always lucky. I was always escaping trouble. I don't know how that was. I must have had a horseshoe up my ass or something. Weeks had passed as I took it upon myself to hook catechism class while hanging down Rosendale Square. Up on the roofs of Rosendale, where all the businesses were underneath us, I had a bird's eye view of all that was happening in this pretty rough neighborhood. Cigarette smoking and hanging out with my brother and other buddies my age was, of course, what I did to kill time, and I would ordinarily have spent in CCD class. 6 weeks of doing this went by pretty quickly, when one day my father screamed at me from the living room for me to get my goddamn ass downstairs. He showed me the letter he received stating that because of my continued absence from CCD class, I would not be available to receive Holy Communion that year. Right then and there, he flipped out, chasing me out of the house, trying to catch me to give me an ass kicking. Time went by that night, and I got home to find my dad a little calmer, but that did not stop him from threatening me with death if I ever hooked CCD class again. My dad and I now had to pay a visit to Sister Bennett, and I was not looking forward to that whatsoever. When we got there, class had just started. Sister was in front of the whole class. She looked perturbed, having to stop to take time from class to explain to my dad what happened, as he pleaded to Sister that it didn't get back into class. My mom would kill us both. She shrieked, "There is nothing I can do about that situation. He missed too much class, and it wouldn't be able to receive Holy Communion with his classmates." Oh boy, you should have seen the look on my dad's face when all of a sudden he just threw his hands up in the air and yelled, "Fuck it! I don't give a shit about the little bastard," as he rushed out the door, slamming it behind him, leaving me standing there awkwardly in front of a completely stunned classroom full of petrified little second graders. Sister Bennett at this point felt horrible about the scene Dad caused and must have felt somewhat responsible because she hugged me seconds later and said, poor boy, I'll let you back in my class and you can still receive Holy Communion with your classmates. Tell your father not to worry." To this point in my life, this seemed to be a recurring theme of life events. I always found a way to get into trouble, but for some reason or another, I always managed to somehow get out of it. Either I had luck of the Irish, or I had a very patient angel by my side. A couple of months later, the day of catechism ceremony, my friends and I broke into the O'Brien's house with David, the O'Brien's youngest son. His father used to lock him out of the house routinely because David could not be trusted alone in the house. True to form, we went in just to smoke my Parliament cigarettes I had just lifted from my mother's pocketbook. Mr. O'Brien came home, unfortunately for me, and caught us in the act. When I got home, my dad got the phone call from Mr. O'Brien and managed to find out about my misdeeds once again. He had a weird, eerie knack for always finding out the shit we got into. He must have had some type of inborn radar where he always knew what we were up to. When I came in to get dressed for Holy Communion ceremony, he met me at the door with his belt in his hand. My grandmother, who I never saw much of and did not even know that well, screamed at him to stop, saying, "Neil, you can't punish him today. It's his Holy Communion day, a special day that should not be remembered for his punishment he got from his own father." Dad looked at me and grumbled, "You lucky little bastard. Today's your lucky day." Another magical moment in my life when I can look back and wonder, how the hell did I get away with it again? That fall, I got into a couple of scrapes with some of the neighborhood kids, and I always ended up with them yelling at me to calm the fuck down, as I was often referred to as a crazy bastard. Street hockey and football were two sports where my brother and I excelled in, and we kind of earned the respect of our neighborhood friends as being tough and crazy, never backing down and always playing better than most of the kids our own age. Life moved slowly, and I dealt with Miss O'Leary and Sister Bennett, and I somehow managed to escape into third grade with my classmates. I went to confession reluctantly a few more times and did receive my Holy Communion with my class back in second grade. But as far as CCD went, I knew I was never going back. That was kind of a done deal for me. The end of my holy studies, at least until I was in high school at Catholic Memorial. Prior to this time, my dad's insane behaviors, which had a profound effect on my psyche. He was a World War II veteran who eventually would have a lot of influence on me because of his insane, crazy antics he pulled in our house, which would inevitably scar me for most of my life. My mom and dad married each other back in the day when couples stayed married for life, which is what they had done. I think Dad was a little bipolar to boot, which would explain much of the way he sometimes acted, and not to forget to mention how all of us kids, to some degree, received his tendencies to all be a little bit bipolar as well.